Hi, welcome into my studio, and on this video I'm going to be using a different type of paper. It's not going to be pastelmat, which is going to surprise and shock quite a few of you, I'm sure, but it's nice to try out some different things from time to time. Now this paper is called Fischer 400 and it's a sanded paper, and by that it means if you receive it, if you buy a paper like this, it actually looks and feels very much like a fine sandpaper. Now there are a few versions of this out there, a few different companies. UArt is another very popular one. Now the UArt comes in different grades, so different roughness and smoothness, 800 being the smoothest. The 400 on the Fischer, it's around about middle of the range, I suppose, going a bit towards the finer, the smoother side of the surface. But make no mistake, this is nothing like pastelmat when you feel it at all. When you move your finger across it, it grabs your finger. As I said, it is like sandpaper. But my whole idea with it is it should take many more layers. That should help with detail as well. So that's the plan. Now, one of the problems with these papers, they're a bit flexible. They're rigid enough, but the UArt in particular has a tendency to warp, or to be a bit concave, convex on it, a bit bent, and the Fischer can do the same as well. And don't forget, pastelmat as well can actually bend a little bit, so it's nice to keep it flat and firm. Now with pastelmat we can buy pastelmat board, so it's basically from Clairefontaine. It's the pastelmat and it's already on a rigid board, and it's my preferred surface to work on, but it's really expensive. A cheap way to do it is to actually stick down your surface, so it could be pastelmat paper, could be the UArt, could be this Fischer, whatever, onto a rigid board. Now you could use a self-adhesive foam board, but my preferred method is using a mount board, a self-adhesive repositionable mount board that I get from Dale Rowney, and no doubt there's lots of other companies that make something similar as well. Now the fact it's repositionable means if we misalign it a little bit, we can actually peel it back off and put it back on there. And it's also specifically made for being against artwork, so it's pH neutral as well. So let's see how I stick it down onto this Fischer 400 paper. So on top, that's the Fischer 400 paper. The writing's obviously on the back side, and there's that Dale mount board underneath. On top you can see that's my pastel box. It's heavy and it's a straight edge. That means I can put the two papers up against each other and I know they're going to be in line. So it's easy to peel this top surface, this release paper, back from the Dale mount board. So the sticky side is there and I'm only pulling it back just a small amount for the moment. Now I already cut this to size using a Stanley knife, a blade and a metal ruler. So I've just butted it up against my wooden board, but any straight edge that's not going to move will work just fine. Then I can put the Fischer 400 right up against it and I know it's in line, and I'm just pushing down, not too hard, on that top surface. Then I can pull my pastel case out of the way because I won't be needing that anymore. So the top edge is now stuck down and I'm just going to pull a bit more of this release paper back off. Now I could have pulled it all off in one go, but I rather do it a little bit at a time so I can gradually press down on the paper. Now because this is a sandpaper, it's very difficult to smooth out. With pastelmat it's super easy to do this, and that's what I've been doing to the last couple of drawings I've done. If I haven't used pastelmat board, I've been putting this backing board on there. It makes it lovely and rigid, and as I said, we could reposition it and remove the drawing from there if we wanted to, but it's perfect for the framer to actually mount your artwork like this. And I'm just bringing it down to the edge. I'll smooth it out, then I'll trim that edge off. So to test out this paper, I've picked an extremely difficult subject, which is probably not the best thing to do, but I wanted a subject that I could really test the details on. So something I wanted to layer upon layer and get lots of fine detail and perhaps push it beyond the detail I've been able to get with pastelmat. So my plan was to use lots of different tools as well. We've got Conti sticks on the right, I've got pan pastels, circular things, I've got my pencils, soft pastels. I wanted to make this a real worthy experiment and try, as I said, lots of different things out on it to see if this would be a good addition to the pastelmat, perhaps if I wanted to work more detailed even, although we can obviously get lots and lots of detail with pastelmat itself. Now straight away, right at the beginning, I'm going to tell you, as probably you already know if you follow me on Facebook, that the experiment didn't work out as I had hoped. I couldn't get as many layers as I wanted to, and I ended up abandoning it, and I'll try it again on pastelmat, this subject on pastelmat. But I think it's still a very worthy exercise to show you how these other papers can work and whether or not you want to spend your money on them. They may suit you, especially if you go more impressionistic, more direct. So perhaps if you're doing a subject like this, you'll be using a lot more soft pastels rather than the pencils themselves. So let's get going and see exactly how it performs. I'm going to start with just the eye section. This is the reference photo, so I've only printed off a small section so I can put that near the drawing and I can get real close in with the details. And I'm going to use my pan pastels. So I've got what I normally do. I just got some white printer paper and I'm using that to mix up the colours. Now you can see in the light areas of the snow leopard, it's not white at all. It's kind of a warm colour in there. And I'm using a bit of burnt sienna, white and an orange tint in the pans as well, and just basically mixing these colours on the paper to get something close to what I'm seeing on that reference photo. Now when you're using a sanded paper, you can absolutely forget about using the little soft tools from Pan Pastel. I tried those ones that are like a little shovel or a little spade on this paper and it ripped the surface immediately off, which is completely what I expected. Alternatively, the other small sponges that you can get, the handheld ones, this is kind of the finger shaped one, which are my preferred soft tools. They seem to be working just fine on there, and I'm only lightly applying it to this Fischer 400 sanded paper surface. And as usual, going in that fur direction pretty much, even at these early stages. Now it's worth saying, you can see I've transferred the drawing over to this paper. Now if you use transfer paper, standard transfer graphite paper, that's pretty much not going to work, but carbon paper will. So you can transfer it that way, and what I've done then, as I've done in a few other videos where I've got spots on animals, I've put the spots in with black gouache paint and I've just thinned it with water, and that means those spots are going to stay in place and they're not going to move around and rub around and contaminate lighter areas. Because this subject is quite light, I didn't want lots of black around straight away. And the other thing with putting the black on the spots straight away, they're going to smudge and end up being lost when you're actually putting in the lighter tones as I'm doing now. This way it doesn't matter if I lose them a little bit, but the pans are a bit more or a bit less opaque than sticks. So as I apply these, you'll see it, I can still see the spots through it. So I use gouache because it dries completely matte, and that's why I don't use acrylic to put those spots in. So I'm just going to carry on now doing this base layer, this initial first layer, where all I'm really looking for are the tones and some accuracy on the colors, but I'm not worrying too much because there's going to be, I assume, another 3 layers on top of this which are going to be more accurate colors, but you've got to start somewhere. So this is that map, this is that groundwork I'm working on now, and so far seems to be going onto this paper really well, nice and easy. The one thing I would say about it, you can't rest your arm on the paper. I rested my arm on there for just a few minutes, felt a bit itchy, and when I looked at it, it was already starting to show a minute rash on there and getting red. I assume it's just from the rubbing onto the sandpaper or the sanded surface. So what I did then, I taped some printer paper onto the bottom section that's just out of screenshot, and that's what I'm using when I rest my arm on there. You can't really rub this in either with your finger, it's just too rough. It's going to take your fingerprint straight off, especially on a subject this large where there's going to be a lot of initial blending. So with the techniques I use, that's another little bit of an issue, but I think I could get around that just by using the stumps a lot more for blending. And if I do the first layer with the pan pastels as I'm doing now, there's not a great deal of blending required with fingers or stumps or anything like that really, especially as this paper is rougher and should take more and more layers. So you can see how I can still see the spots straight through that pan pastel, and I can darken those up later on with pastel as well. And I'm mixing lots of different colours. I've got some purplish grey, I've got a green in there. It's very surprising, even in this little area, the colour differences, the colour variances. I'm just going to speed it up a bit now on the video, because all I'm doing is just blocking in this underlayer, and so far so good. Okay, back down to normal speed, and I've got the Conti sticks, which you've most likely seen me use on lots of other videos, and I'm starting now to put in a bit of fur texture. Now you will have seen me do this technique possibly if you've watched it on the leopard eyes video. So I wanted to start on the eyes on this Fischer 400 paper because it's given me something to judge it against, because I've done something not that dissimilar on Pastelmat. So I know how I'm hoping this is going to react to these Conti sticks. There's still lots of roughness to the surface as I feel it, so I should be able to build up the layers quite nicely. Conti sticks are firm, so they're not filling the tooth of the paper up too much either, so the paper is really getting a good shot at being able to allow me to do lots of details as I progress. So as you can see, applying this on the edge in that fur direction as always. And there's some nice greys in the Conti set that's particularly suited to wildlife art. And because this paper is so rough, I can't use my finger, only for little bits. So this is a finger cot, so it's basically just the finger part of a rubber glove. And I'm blending in, but what I'm being a bit surprised with, to be honest, is that it's blending so smoothly. It's only really the second layer, and Pastelmat holds the pastel a bit better. I'm using a paper stump there to try that out as well. But the finger is really, I would expect some of the marks of texture that I put down there to have stayed. But as I'm only going over very lightly, it's really blurring out and blending out, which would be ideal for a background if you wanted a real subtle, soft background. but those marks I put on have pretty much blended straight in. And as I said, with a paper this rough, I was a little bit surprised with that. So now I'm going to have to put another layer on top again. And I think I'll start to put some of these spots in place so that I can judge the darkness of them and judge the lighter fur against that. Now the one thing I notice as I'm putting this dark in, this is not a new pastel dark, it's just a Conti stick, and it's coming out really black. So there's obviously a lot of pastel going down into the paper, even though I'm only using it very lightly. So once again, just lightly touching that black, it blended more than I was expecting. So what I'm going to do is actually concentrate on the eye as something I can, I'm confident with, and I'm going to see how these pastels perform on this paper. Because at the moment I'm losing a bit of confidence. Everything is just blending, and I was expecting the opposite problem, to be honest. On a paper this rough, I was expecting nothing to actually blend easily, so I was quite prepared to for that, and I'm finding the opposite issue. So I'm just going to use mainly my pencils and just see how the blocking in of this eye and how detailed I can go quite quickly on it, using exactly the same techniques. So little circular motions, and it's apparent as I'm using the pencil that it's really a lot of pastel is coming down onto the paper no matter how lightly I'm applying it. The other thing I'm finding is, because the pastel, a lot of pastel is going down, as I said, even when I apply it finally, I'm finding it a bit more difficult to get subtle colour changes. So for instance, on this section of the eye I'm working on now, there's some really light tints in there, there's some light green tints, but as I would normally with pastelmat, just tap that pencil on there, when I do it on this, a lot of the colour is going down. So I'm having to come back in with white to try and lighten it again to make it more subtle. Now no doubt if I just kept using this paper, drawing after drawing after drawing, I'd start to become more familiar with the little nuances and the way it works. But you can see I just blended that with a little bit of my finger and it's just wiped it all out again. So I'm going to have to reapply again and redarken. That surprised me a lot. So what seems to be better for this paper would be a more direct approach. So put the pastel down and leave it, and then build up from there. So a more painterly appearance rather than a subtle layered blended appearance. And looking back, I'm thinking back now of the very realistic wildlife art I've seen with papers like this. They're usually really large scale. Now this one is large scale, but they're normally larger than that again, or they're done in a more painterly way. So as I said, that's kind of what I'm finding as well. You don't want to be doing a lot of blending on here if you're doing realistic work. Here I'm using my pencil on the side just to glaze. Once again, you can see a lot of colours going down rather than a little subtle shade. So I'm going to use a lighter tone now to try and subdue that as well. So really I'm struggling a bit at this moment, fighting against the paper. And every time I'm touching the paper, even the lightest touch, is just blending away and making more of a muddy colour. So I'm still trying to make it work like Pastelmat, but it's not going to work like Pastelmat. It's becoming quite obvious now, which is fair enough. It's his own paper. I didn't need another duplicate, but what I was hoping for was something I could really get lots of detail with, and I'm struggling at the moment, even just on the eye, because the first layer seems to go down very easily, and then other layers just seem to be kind of sitting on the surface and blending away. I'm leaving the actual eye at the moment because I'm pretty disappointed with that. It's okay, I suppose I could keep going back into it, but let's see how how this paper deals with fur texture, because that's really the only reason I'm using this paper. Wanted to see if it'll hold the pastel even more. Experience now on that eye is that it's probably not going to hold the pastel as I was hoping. But let's see, let's give it a good go, and I'll use exactly the same techniques I would normally be using. Another thing with this paper, it comes in one colour as far as I know, and that's this sand colour. So you've got the option, you can paint it, but you know I like mid-tone paper, so I'm struggling a bit as well with the fact this paper is just so light, which makes judging colours and tones much more difficult. What I'm finding so far with the pencils is becoming very powdery on the surface, very soft. As you can see, layer upon layer, rather than keeping the edges, it's as I said, it's going softer looking. Even though I'm using fairly sharp pencils as well most of the time. And I'm finding I really can't blend. If I touch the surface of this now, it's all going to blend together and fuzz out. Okay, with the top section, well, kind of done. I've spent quite a long time on this now. Getting frustrated with the paper, it's just blending too much. It's kind of, although the paper surface feels completely different and looks different to the ombre or ingress paper, it's kind of getting that type of feel now when I'm building layers up, and it's just blending away from me. Even with the lightest touch, just blending away. So on this bottom section, I'm going to go more painterly. Do a lot less of the blending, because I know now I'm not going to be using this paper. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. is a superb reference photos, and the subjects from wildlife reference photos, and I want to do it justice, and this paper is not going to allow me to show off my best ability and to put a lot of work into it. So I'm not going to complete this, but I am going to carry on with this bottom section of the eye and just, as I said, be a bit more direct and a lot more painterly with it. Now as I'm being looser, it's working a bit better, and if your style is more loose, you may want to use this paper. I particularly can't see a benefit over pastelmat. Perhaps you can't get pastelmat and you can't get any of the others I suggested, or you can't make your own, which I've got on my YouTube channel showing pastel grounds, and to be honest they kind of performed better for me than this paper. You can see how this just won't take those layers, it's just going soft all the time. So I'm using a sharp white pencil to just get some sort of fur detail in here. But I must admit I'm quite disappointed, so I'm not going to be trying out UART either, I don't think, because the 400 in this feels pretty much identical to perhaps a 600 in UART. I may give it a go one day. But for now I think I'll be sticking to pastelmat, especially for my larger works. I'm not going to be trying out a paper on something this large, but I was really quite confident that it was going to work, and I'm quite excited to try it out. So as I bring this video to an end, hope you've learnt something from it. It's good to try things out even if they don't turn out how we expect them to. If I hadn't done things like this, I never would have found my preferred papers, and who knows, new papers could come out. There could be papers out there now that I'd really enjoy working on. So as I said, you've got to try these things out, but my lesson is learnt. Next time I'm trying things out, I'm going to be doing on a much smaller scale so that I'm not investing a lot of time in there. But I wanted to show you this video as well because it's important to see not only things that turn out well for me, but also things that don't turn out quite as well, so you can learn from it, perhaps save money, or perhaps you've got different ideas of what you could try, or perhaps your painting style is different than mine. You know, we don't all want to do fine realism. Some people rather a more painterly approach, and it may well be worth you trying some of this paper and just getting a small sheet to give it a go. But I'm not going to give up on this subject. I'm going to give it a go on my normal pastel mat paper. So see you all again real soon. If you're looking for even more great art sources, I've really got you covered. First off, I've got a Patreon channel. It's been going well over a year or so, packed with around about 50 or more videos and new ones every month. Lots of the videos are many hours long, so you can see they're really in-depth. Subjects such as turtles, birds, elephants, big cats, you name it, is on there. So that's my Patreon channel. And also on that Patreon channel, before I go on to something else, I've got a secret Facebook group, so only the members are actually on there. It's the most supportive and friendly Facebook group that I've ever seen. I know I'm biased, but it really is. We've got 400 or 500 members on there, and they all help each other. So that's a great added bonus. That comes free with it. Also, you get line art every month as well. And we've just designed a brand new companion website for it. So if you've joined other Patreons and channels and you found it very difficult to navigate around, we've got this free website that comes with it. All the videos are now just a single click away. Couldn't be any easier than it is. I've also got my site, jasonmorgan.co.uk. Lots of tutorial videos, DVD discs and downloads on there. And if you're struggling for reference photos for your art projects, I've got some of those too. I've got 900 plus on my website, wildlifeart-online.com, and they will be copyright free for you, so you can paint and draw from them and sell your work with no copyright worries whatsoever. So hope you like those extra resources, and I'll see you all again real soon.